Welcome to the Aligned Ambition Show, where we share women's entrepreneurial wisdom. Are you a woman starting or growing your online heart-centered business? Are you wanting to do things differently? Do you feel icky about using manipulative marketing tactics and are ready to align your business with your ethics, values, and life goals? If this sounds like you, then stick around for this conversation.
We're the dreamers, the believers, breaking through the mold, building up our visions with a purpose brave and bold.
All right, welcome. Welcome to the Aligned Ambition Show. I'm your host, Larissa Russell. And today I have with me Terri-Ann Russell. Terri-Ann is a Reiki Master Teacher, Soul Guide Facilitator, and author. She is an intuitive empath healer with abilities in... I should not read bios. This is my thing always. You're good at what you do. You can hear and see, right? Claire,
I can hear and feel.
Hear and feel. Okay. We'll come back to that after your bio. I apologize. She is a transformative author whose works offer profound insights into life, death, and the soul's eternal journey. You know what? I even practiced those beforehand because I get tripped up on them all the time. Welcome, Terri-Ann.
I love it. You know, that's the thing about being live. Everything is just you fly by the seat of your pants sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And I am about as authentic as they come. So for those words that I tripped over, can you please say them and explain them?
Sure. So I am clairsentient. Clairsentient means that I feel, and that's what an intuitive empath healer is. I feel a lot in my body. Since I was a child, I always had the ability to feel others' emotions, feel others' pain, suffering, things like that. And I'm also clairaudient, which gives me the ability to sometimes hear. So I can hear it either inside my body or outside of my body. I can hear it as the voice of the person, or I can hear it as someone else. But I do have clairvoyance once in a while. I have seen apparitions and have premonitions, although my clairvoyance is not as strong as my other ones.
See what I mean about tripping over the words? And they're words that I know, but often my brain just decides, oh, we don't need to use those today. So there we go. And can you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you ended up doing what you do?
Okay. It's a long story. So the shortened version is I grew up in a very strict narcissistic household as a child. And I went from that to 19 years old being in a narcissistic marriage that ended in domestic violence, almost taking my life. I had a young daughter at the time who was born with an illness, and she had 4 intestinal surgeries and almost died. We came out to Arizona to help get her help. And while we were here, that's when my final domestic violence issue took place, and I was almost killed. So I left that situation, and about 3 years later, my daughter began bleeding internally, and the doctors couldn't find where it was. She was too small to do surgery. So I started doing energy healing. It popped into my awareness one day. I grew up Catholic, so I'm familiar with the laying of the hands, if you know that. So it was familiar to me. And I began Reiki on her. And from there, she bled internally for 3 years. That last year I did Reiki. She is 8 years hospital free now. She's 15, no blood transfusions at all. Her doctors are astounded. And of course, back then they weren't doing Reiki as much in the hospitals as they are now. So it's nice to see that shift and that change. About 3 years after that, my life was smooth sailing. I was remarried, living my dream life. We lived in Sedona. I was doing energy healing. I was following my purpose. And my son suddenly passed away from a tragic illness similar to what my daughter had. Totally changed the whole trajectory of everything in my life. And I was brought to see, feel, know, understand a new way of doing things. He was really the catalyst. I became an author. I published 2 books, and my life really began to shift and change in those moments because such a tragic loss. I had to find a way to get what I was feeling out of my body. It was so heavy, so intense for me, that I began writing, and that was very cathartic for me through that process. So that's the shortened version.
Condense all that trauma into 2 minutes or less. That is a lot, and I'm so sorry for your loss. And
Thank you.
The signs obviously weren't there for your son, that were there for your daughter. But also the things that happen in our life often happen for a reason, right? You would not be on the trajectory that you are had this not happened. Not that I wish that your son had died, of course. But
No, I know what you're saying.
yes, and so those things that happen in our life and taking them and moving in a new direction. And the 2 books, can you tell us a little bit about the 2 books that you wrote?
Sure. So the first book is From Death to Life, and it's the incredible true story of Anthony Joseph. Anthony, I was informed, he lived in Flagstaff. We lived in Sedona. He was about an hour away from us. During the night, an officer knocked on our door and informed us that my son had passed. At that time, we had no information, but when my boys were younger, I had premonitions that one of my sons would pass, and I could never see whose face it was or what was the circumstances. So I was very protected from that. But that entire scene that I had premonitions with played out the night the officer informed us. So the book is really about me channeling him. It's raw, it's emotional. I share some of his journals that I found in his apartment after he passed about his dreams and premonitions and his ability to see, feel, hear, and know. And so, it's been a hard, amazingly painful, beautiful journey, transformative, all wrapped into one. That was my first book with him. My second book, I ended up a year later beginning to write the Crystalline Light series, which will be a series of books. This one is called Reaching for You, and it's with Mother Mary. And it really dives deep into what I do and the connection with Mother Mary. And it's called, there's activations or transmissions that we do. And so you read them and it activates something within you. There's 12 of those to go through the book. It's a workbook, and it took me a year to write and another year to integrate all of those energies after I wrote the book. So I was really deeply ingrained in being alone, spending a lot of time on my own, and diving into those books.
Yeah. Writing is so cathartic. It's, journaling is one of the things that I recommend for almost anything, because, being able to write, process those feelings, we're taught not to feel.
Yes.
And so writing is a really good way to get that started, to allow those feelings to come through. And with that has changed your journey that you've been on. And now to the work that you do. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how it aligns with this most recent book?
Yeah, so my work has obviously shifted and changed through my journey. And my experiences are always directly related to what I'm doing, where I'm growing. A lot of what held me back were limiting beliefs, deeply rooted in past lives, present lives, ancestral, my grandmother, my mother, down to me. And so a lot of the work that I do today is ancestral healing. It's through that that brings this deep transformation. A lot of us are aware that we have limiting beliefs, but often a lot of them are deeply embedded, that they're so subconscious. They're just like a routine program running in the back of our mind, and we're not even really aware that that's what's occurring. So a lot of my clients that come to me, I often share with them, it's about really being mindful, getting into a space of starting to hear how we talk to ourselves in those moments when we're alone, right? I used to think, even before Anthony and Sophia, that I was a positive person until I started to listen to me talk to myself. And then I would start to hear those negative limiting beliefs come up. And so that's one thing I teach my clients first and foremost, is you've got to get into a space of peace and quiet. You've got to learn stillness, and you've got to listen to those really subtle thoughts that are coming in sometimes.
Yeah, it's so funny because our book club is just doing The Power of Now, right? And today we
I
were
love that.
listening to, yeah, to, the chapter about just that, about, our mind is just constantly going, and it's controlling us, and, we're not controlling it, and we just need to get silent. And it is such an important part in our empowered living program. We do similar with our meditation and things like that to try and silence that, but also paying attention to what you're actually saying to yourself. We don't even pay attention to it. And that constant chatter is going on, and those limiting beliefs, the negative self-talk, all of that. And when we start to pay attention, it's like, whoa, would you ever say those things to somebody else? Right? Yeah, absolutely. And so with your business, how has that changed how you actually do business? With the work that you do, what do you do differently to run your business?
Yeah, so I'm also very type A. Let me just preface by saying that I grew up in a very controlling environment. So I learned to be very controlling. And for me, type A came very naturally. I liked my ducks all lined up in this beautiful row, and they had to be perfect. And it took me a long time to get away from that. And a lot of that catalyst was learning to let go of that masculine old way of thinking, because I had to be masculine. I didn't have the support I needed to be feminine. So a lot of my life was masculine, which also is you have to hustle. You have to work hard. You have to struggle. You have to, there's no time to rest. You can't rest. If you rest, you're lazy. These were the limiting beliefs that I had running in my background program that kept me in that space of struggle. And not only struggle, but always hustling, always trying to get to the next one and find the next client. And it wasn't authentic with me. I found it was really difficult for me to do that. That's not the kind of person that I am, but that's all that I knew at that point. And then after Anthony passed and I had the experience with Sophia being sick, I learned to see things in a different way. There was a more feminine way of doing things. And a lot of what I do today with the working on limited beliefs, sacred wellness is about balancing that masculine and feminine, right? Because we don't want it to just go away. There is a need for a part of us to be masculine, and there's a need for a part of us to be feminine. So how do we find that balance within us? And finding that balance is a lot of what I teach. So being authentic for me is sharing my vulnerability, learning to use my voice and share my truths. I share a lot. I'm very vulnerable and open about my experiences. And I think that comes through in the work that I do. When I meet people, especially people that have lost children, it's hard to understand if you haven't had that type of experience. I can have empathy and I can have compassion, but when you have the next level, now I've experienced this. And so that compassion and empathy is sort of amped up, right? I have a different understanding. And because I'm such an intuitive empath healer, I feel so much of what their pain is. I'm able to relate that to them. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Speaking my language. I think it's really important as we move into the feminine energies, right? Because you're right, we have to have both, but we've been so immersed in the masculine energies and the way our world runs, and not even the healthiest of masculine energies.
Right.
So to bring those feminine energies in can be sometimes a struggle, because it goes against what we've been taught, right? Our intuition, our creativity, our collaborations, and all of the different things, the energies that go with that are not things that we are typically taught, right? The masculine energies of push, 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 and don't worry about self-care, and, manipulation, and everything, just like have to produce. Nothing is for naught. We have to, always have to be pushing for something. And it can be really difficult to switch over to that. What's one thing that you help sort of get people that you work with to move towards some of those feminine energies?
It's hard in the beginning because I understand that there's a lot of them that are just so deeply immersed in it. And it's not just that they were taught that, they had no other choice but to be that, right? You know, when I was married to my ex-husband who was abusive and controlling, I had no other choice but to be able to read the room, to people please, to do everything I could do so that the bear wasn't disrupted, if you will, you know? And a lot of that is so deeply embedded within our cells. Our cells hold on to that memory as well. So when I'm working with women who are stuck in that, you know, I've tried, you know, and a lot of times I think we also have the belief that self-care, I just did a show on this the other day, like self-care is not what you think it is. It is those things, but it's also going deeper into that. It's saying no, it's learning to use your voice and not having any guilt. And as a mom and a wife, sometimes we harbor a lot of that guilt because, you know, we have other people that we're thinking about and we say no. So with my clients, there's many different modalities I've been trained in. I like to use theta healing for those deeply embedded emotions that really dive into those cellular memories that are there. And that can be also from past lives. And that's where my spiritual hypnosis comes into play too. Maybe it's a spiritual hypnosis session that I'm going to do where we're looking at the past lives and why they're exactly like that. So there's many different modalities. I always say when I'm choosing to work with somebody, you know, I tune into exactly what it is that they need. So they may come to me for Reiki, but that may not be what they end up doing because, yeah, I can do it, but it's not the result or the benefit that I feel that the guidance I've been given from their higher self needs.
That's what I love about having so many different modalities in your toolbox, right? Because that's often the case. There's no one way to fix things. And so, you know, using different tools along the way, I think is really important. I also, well, I love learning. So, you know,
Me too.
all those certifications, let's get them all. I don't do as much hands-on healing any longer, although I've been really called to move back towards it. So I may in the near future. But, you know, just having those tools as I work with the women that I work with has been really helpful and I think really important to do that. And yeah, to help people move, because it is that when you were talking about the cellular, like it's in our body and we have to remove that. So just like thinking it away doesn't do it. You know, I remember years ago, I'd done all this therapy about, you know, a family member and was like, oh, I've got this, right? Run into them in public and realize I don't got this. So realize because it's so in us and you have to remove it from the body to be able to deal fully with that. And so I think that's a really important part too. It's not about just thinking things away. And
Yeah, and I share that often because often when people talk about mindfulness or manifestation, you know, why isn't it coming through? I did everything you told me to do. I journaled, I lit the candles, I burned the papers, and nothing's working. And it's because you have those limiting beliefs that are still there. And the body, what I found because of my grief with Anthony, because I had not experienced grief that deeply, I had grandparents that had passed, but they were in their 90s. So it wasn't, you know, unexpected. It wasn't as emotional. And so what I found with my grief was that it was so entrenched in my physical body. Even though I had all these tools, my body was reacting to things and my body will still react. We're just coming up on 6 years. And my body goes into this mode. June and July, he was born in June. He passed in July 27. My body, before I'm even thinking about it, is going into this mode of freeze. I know it's coming. What's it going to look like? It's going to be so painful for me to experience. So often what I teach my clients is about the body aspect of it. And I think a lot of them miss that sometimes because we're not thinking, we're thinking with our mind, our logical, but our body is the intuitive. That's the feminine aspect of us, right? We're going to feel these things. And so when we feel them, if we're recognizing a feeling I get about somebody, you know, I was taught don't be rude, hug that person, kiss that person when you're little. And I would get like this feeling about them, and I didn't want to do it, but I was forced to do it. So as I grew up and I started to learn all this stuff, my body would actually react to this before my mind would even get into this. And then I would be like, oh, you're being silly, and that's where the thoughts come in, because then you're like, no, it's nothing, just do it. Hence the reason I was in the situations I was in.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, because we are often, we are from childhood indoctrinated into certain things that we're supposed to do. And that really do cause us a lot of harm, especially women, a lot of harm as we get older. I mean, everyone, but, women. And that's a perfect example of the things that we are forced to do, whether we want to or not. And then we, grow up, and all of a sudden we're just doing the things that go against everything within us. Those safety mechanisms are kicking in, but we're ignoring them because we've been taught to ignore them. Yeah. And so coming back to that, really
and
important.
It's nice to see. So my daughter is just 15, and she can use her words and she can verbalize, and she says, oh, that person makes me uncomfortable. I'm not going to do that. And I'm perfectly fine with it. But I've had family members say that, no, she has to do that. And I'm like, no, she is not going to do that. Because of my experiences, I've been able to now help her see that she has her voice, right? I wasn't allowed to use my voice. So one thing I've done with my daughters is really teach them the importance of the voice and using that. And it's funny how you still get that pullback from those older generations about what's right.
Yeah, it's so well. And even, I wouldn't even say just the older, definitely the older, but the younger generation as well. My daughter is really good, but some of her friends will be like, no, you need to do that, because they got it from their parents and so there's still some work to be done. We just keep moving forward, but it is getting so much better, because I notice it like with my grandkids, the difference, in how they're being raised. Yes. It's okay to say no and all of those things. So yeah, absolutely. Wow. So many important things to share. And any final thoughts before we go today? Anything we didn't touch on that you want to make sure people know?
I would just say, really trusting your intuition and trusting your higher self is so important. More than trusting other people outside. We've also been taught to listen to other people outside of us over our own intuition. And so one of the things I teach is connecting with the higher self, and the importance of really listening, because we are always connected to source, right? There's a piece of us through our soul that is always connected and knows the way. But we've just been so inundated and busy and overwhelmed that we haven't been able to do that. So just listen to your intuition, connect with your higher self, make time for stillness and stuff like that. That would be my message.
Oh, I love that one. It's so important. And thank you. Thank you. And so where can people find you if they want to learn more or get in touch with you?
So my books are on Amazon, but you can also find me on Linktree at Terri-Ann Russell, and all of my services are there. My books are there. You can access everything on there. My podcast is on there as well.
Perfect. And we do have that linked below. So if you're looking for Terri-Ann, just click that link and you can find all of her resources there. And again, thank you, Terri-Ann, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And for our listeners, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Aligned Ambition Show. Are you a woman interested in aligning your heart-centered business with your ethics, values, and life goals? Join our Aligned Business Building Mastermind for accountability, like-minded women who become your business colleagues to share your journey with, resources and trainings, and so much more. Join us for 1 month free using the link below. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on the Aligned Ambition Show.